Hello, I am Melanie Carlos, the Executive Director of X-Minds. The X-Minds and the Autism Society of Maryland are proud to present tonight's event, Virtual Vigilance, Safeguarding Autistic Students from Cyberbullying. First, I want to quickly mention we are recording this in both English and Spanish, and we'll make the recordings and presentation slides available to you in a few days. For the Spanish speakers in the audience, I want to play a recording to give you instructions for finding the Spanish channel.
Para escuchar esta presentación en español, haga clic en la opción de menú Interpretación y seleccione Español.
I know we're all excited about our guest tonight, but before I introduce him, I would like to share a few words about who we are. Partnership for Extraordinary Minds, or X-Minds for short. We are a parent-led nonprofit organization, and this year we're celebrating 15 years of serving the autism community in Montgomery County, Maryland. Our mission is to partner with families, educators, and providers to improve educational outcomes for autistic students. And to do this, we host a monthly speaker series, which you're attending right now. We also provide 5 other free monthly events, 4 different parent discussion groups, and we have 1 monthly in-person playground meetup for families with younger children. A couple of weeks ago, we had a teen social, and we hope to have more social events for middle and high school students. Our website, xminds.org, is pretty extensive. Our newest webpage includes resources about bullying and autism. And our events associate, Annie Pruitt, will include that link in the chat. We also offer families support in navigating the IEP process, and we offer a free X-Minds team consult to parents so they can ask questions and gather input from a committee of parent advocates who are trained and supervised by a professional educational advocate. Annie can put a link in the chat for those of you who are interested in that service. X-Minds offers many other supports and services, so I urge you to check out our website, our calendar of events, and subscribe to our monthly newsletter so you don't miss out. This event would not be possible without X-Minds' partnership with our friends at the Autism Society of Maryland, also known as AWESOME. Tonight, we have Kristen Letnick, their Montgomery County Resource Coordinator. I would just like to introduce her, and she has a few words.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Letnick, and as Melanie said, I am the Montgomery County Resource Coordinator for the Autism Society of Maryland, or AWESOME for short. We used to be the Howard County Autism Society. We recently expanded to Montgomery County and Anne Arundel County at the end of last year. So we're still a little new, but we've been making some great partnerships like with X-Minds. And our mission, the Autism Society of Maryland, is to serve individuals on the autism spectrum, their families, and the community by providing information, support, and advocacy. Also by promoting awareness of autism that values the dignity and uniqueness of each individual, and by working to improve the quality of and access to services and to educational opportunities. So I'm just going to go ahead and put our website information in the chat. And I also wanted to make a quick plug for our upcoming annual Bags and Beers Cornhole Tournament. That's this Saturday, May 18th from noon to 4 p.m. at the Reckless Shepherd Brewing Company in Columbia, where our main office is. It's for players of all abilities and ages. So if you don't know anything about cornhole, that's fine. And all the proceeds go towards autistic individuals and their families. So if you want to learn more, I'll go ahead and put that event link in the chat too. It's not too late to get tickets. And I'll also include the contact information for our executive director, Melissa Rosenberg, who will be running the event. And it's nice to meet you all. And I can't wait to learn with you from our guest speaker tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, it sounds like a fun way to spend your Saturday, beer and cornhole. For a good cause too.
Definitely.
Yeah. I just want to now introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Chad Rose. Um, I, we have been planning this series on bullying and autism for a long time, and one of the things that really stood out was cyberbullying and how different it is in terms of bullying. So we wanted to dedicate an entire webinar to it. Today's digital world poses unique challenges for our kids, and our children are fully immersed in a world of texts, tweets, posts, chat rooms, and message boards. But the use of that technology to harass, threaten, embarrass, or target another person, also known as cyberbullying, is especially dangerous for autistic kids. Our guest tonight is an expert on this ever-changing environment, Dr. Chad Rose. Special education was not part of his original game plan. He wanted to be a third grade teacher, but he ended up accepting a position as a high school special education teacher for the opportunity to coach football. However, it didn't take long before he fell in love with working with students with disabilities. Since then, he has continually expanded his knowledge and skills in working with students with challenging behaviors. And currently, he works with schools, educators, and parents across the country, creating multi-tiered systems of support for establishing anti-bullying policies and programs. He's a prolific scholar and the recipient of the Council for Exceptional Children's Distinguished Early Career Research Award. He is considered to be one of the most promising scholars in the area of bullying among students with disabilities. Professor Rose and his team at the Bully Prevention Lab frequently consult with tech companies to develop strategies to combat cyberbullying. He joins us tonight from the University of Missouri, where he is an associate professor in the Department of Special Education and the director of the Mizzou Ed Bully Prevention Lab. We are excited to have him with us tonight. Please give him a warm welcome, Dr. Chad Rose.
Thank you. I am excited to be here too. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's get this up and running. Can everybody see participant? Yes. We're good?
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so let me get started by, I appreciate that introduction. I'm going to add a little bit of context to that. I've been studying bullying and bullying prevention now for since 2006, so for quite some time. I came to bullying by way of school violence. What I wanted to understand was why kids engaged in violent behavior in schools and why we as adults responded the way we do. I was a former high school special education teacher that worked primarily with youth that had behavior-oriented disabilities, including behavior disorders. And a large portion of my students had engaged in what we would consider to be violent and/or aggressive behaviors. And so from that lens, I really wanted to study violence and primarily school violence. And so I went to get my Ph.D. and I started talking to folks. And what we found and what my mentor told me was that bullying really is situated in the middle of violence, right? Kids that experience high rates of victimization have a higher likelihood of responding in a violent way to avoid that victimization. And kids that engage in high rates of aggressive types of behaviors tend to be labeled our school bullies. And what was even more notable during this conversation, and this happened, and like I said, in 2006, was that there were only 6 publications, 6 research studies that looked at bullying among youth with disabilities, either as a primary or secondary focus. And so that's when my career was born. I am currently the director of the Mizzou Ed Bully Prevention Lab, and I have been at Mizzou for 11 years. And since that time, my team and I and my colleagues and I have had the pleasure of really helping us lay the foundation for what we know about bullying and youth with disabilities in this country. And so today we have addressed cyberbullying, and we do a lot of work in cyberbullying. So today we're going to do and talk about cyberbullying, but I also think we're going to talk about something that's very interesting to everyone else, which is the flip side of cyberbullying, and that's relationship development in online spaces. Um, and so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I want to do is really recognize the boundaries between our physical and virtual worlds. And I'm going to be taking you for a few minutes down memory lane if you're a Gen Xer like me, uh, or give you a history lesson if you're not. Um, but really, what we have to understand today in today's society is that technology is interwoven into the way we socialize. And I say we because we as adults still are bound by technology. I have my phone sitting right here next to me. I can see any emails or text messages or any like social media notifications that come up. And so we're bound by these virtual worlds. And right now for kids, virtual and physical worlds are almost indistinguishable. And so as a matter of fact, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she'll text her friend sitting right next to her, and so these the virtual and physical worlds are now interwoven. So we do have this changing landscape of social interactions. And the reason why I'm going to start a little bit with the history of how we started to socialize online is because it gives us some point of context for why cyberbullying happens today. Um, the first thing I want to start with, and the first thing that I think is incredibly important to talk about, is conversations. Um, and as you all know, conversations are complicated. And whether those conversations are in physical space or virtual space, they have rules and norms that need to be taught, but are rarely taught to our youth. And I'm just going to give you a brief glimpse of how we teach conversations in our schools and how this can become problematic, whether it's virtual or in physical worlds, right? The way we teach conversations in our schools, typically, if we address it at all, is very linear, meaning that you talk, I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, I talk, right? And there's a distinct pause and break between each turn. It's basic turn taking. Now, this is great if we're teaching our kids how to communicate with authority figures, with people that with parents, teachers, people that serve authority role. However, when kids are interacting with one another, that's not the case, right? So even when we interact with one another, we interrupt each other, we talk over each other. It's this natural flow of conversation that happens in peer-to-peer interactions. Now, the reason why I wanted to start this off is because I want to recognize that there are nuances in socialization that are important for us to consider, and conversation is one of those, especially when we're talking about our youth with autism. Because if we teach a very linear approach to having conversations, if we teach this very linear approach, and one of our students with autism goes out and engages with what they just learned with their peers, and there's interruptions, and there's this natural flow of conversation happening, yet our youth with autism took it very literally, then they're going to struggle with that point of conversation. Um, and the reason why it's critically important for us to recognize that is because we have to start teaching our kids socialization in different contexts, and recognizing that the way we socialize, whether it's virtual or in physical worlds, is context dependent. That there's no one size fits all way to have a conversation. It's really important for us to talk about the importance of language, that language matters, words matter, the way you say them matters, when you say them, how you say them, all of these things matter. And I don't think that A, we do a great job in our schools teaching this. B, us as parents, and I'm a parent myself, us as parents have a difficult time teaching this because we never learned step by step how to do direct instruction. But what's most important is that we undervalue in our schools the necessity for teaching these nuanced social skills. And I'm starting today out because now we're starting to recognize that there are nuanced social skills in the technological space as well. So let me take you down memory lane. If you are a Gen Xer, let me take you on a history tour if you're not. So when I was a kid growing up in Yorktown, Indiana, if I wanted to talk to somebody, I would walk down and talk to them. I walk down to their house, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, let's go out and play." Or I'd scream down at them, right? I'd yell, "Hey, what y'all doing?" Or we sent letters to one another if we couldn't walk down or talk, right? We hand wrote letters, sent them off. Then we evaluate. Then we have phones, which when I started using a phone, we had they hung on the wall. I remember it was that ugly mustard yellow color, hung on the wall, and it had this long cord on it to where you could walk into a room and shut the door, but your parents could get on it and tell you to get off because they needed to make a phone call. But it still was a way. It still was a way for us to connect with people that we weren't sharing a physical space with. The only difference between using the phone at that time and using social media now is that we more than likely knew that person in a physical space. Then we got pagers. I remember when I was a junior in high school, I got a pager, so I'd get a 911 text, and I'd have to run to find a payphone. I mean, try to find a payphone today. It's wild. And then we got the cordless phone, which was great, right? Because you took that big old long antenna, you can walk around the house, you can go into your bedroom, and you can talk to your friends or whoever. Now, the importance of these pieces of technology in the way we communicate today is what I really want to note is that there's fundamentally very little difference because we still had the means to communicate with people that we didn't share physical space with through through phones. Now it's just a little different because now people can share interactions in all sorts of different medium, um, and talk to people that they probably have never met in physical space. And I'm sure that that's what everybody is concerned about are these people that our children have never met in physical space and the dangers that are associated with interactions in that context. Now, bear in mind that these things didn't start with our kids generations, right? This interaction didn't start there. If you remember, if you're of my generation and you remember us getting those AOL CD-ROMs in the mail and you get 20 free hours of the internet, what I want you to think back on, if you don't know the history here, then here's a history lesson. But those of you who experience this, what I want you to think back on is is those chat rooms that happened in AOL to where you were chatting with people for the first time, really commercially, chatting with people that you didn't share a physical space with, that you didn't know in a physical space, and that you had never met in person. So you now were chatting. Those spaces were not regulated. Those spaces were new. People didn't know how to interact with them, and they were in large part dangerous. And it prompted a whole series of television programs and law enforcement initiatives to watch out for predators online. And if you're in my generation, that's kind of the frame of reference that we go into in today's social media world is that that wild west chat room that happened in AOL. It is different now. So there's a lot of things that are different. Um, and then you have MySpace and you have AOL Instant Messenger if you were on those things. Um, but I don't want to belabor this point anymore. Uh, but I do want to paint a picture of reality for everyone. Now, this comes from the Pew Research Center recently from 2022, and I trust the Pew Research Center. They've been doing a lot of great work. And it used to be when we would talk about cyberbullying or we would talk about access, people would tell us, well, not everybody has access to social media, the internet, all of these different things. You know, we would hear that access is limited for certain people in certain regions of the country for various reasons. But if you look at the most recent study, you can see that 95% of our youth age 13 to 17 have access to a smartphone. 95% of our youth have access to a smartphone. And then 90% of our youth have access to a desktop or laptop computer that is internet ready. And 80% of our youth have access to gaming consoles. And so we're talking a large majority of our youth, age 13 to 17, have immediate access. Now, what are they doing with that access? You can see that over half of our teens say that it'd be hard for them to give up social media. And nearly half of our teens say that they're using the internet almost constantly. So our students are on these pages and interacting in ways that some of us haven't really thought about before. And some of us really don't know all the apps and don't know where, because technology is ever changing. So where are our youth and what are our youth doing? So you can see 95% of our youth right now are on YouTube. Uh, And you may think, oh, well, YouTube isn't a social media platform, but it is, right? So there are a couple of things that we would want to watch out for on YouTube. And you know, because students and youth are posting videos and they're commenting on each other's videos. It's a way for them to post longer videos. But one thing that we've found is sometimes youth go onto a random video and they will comment, they will at someone else, and they will have an entire chat line within a video. And it's the reason why that's happening is because it masks it from any of the direct messages or information that would be easily gathered by a parent should they be looking at their child's phone or computer. Then we see that we have 67% on TikTok, 62 on Instagram, 59% on Snapchat. Those are the major four. Those four are the major four. You can see that Instagram and Snapchat have grown in popularity from 2014 to 15 to 2022. And so I would encourage you, uh, we can even include Facebook and Twitter in there if you want. But the first thing that I encourage all parents, all adults to do is become consumers of what kids are consuming. Know the app, know where they go, what they're doing, find the parental controls. They're located in various different spots on each one of these apps, but I guarantee you, a YouTube video for each one. So find the parental controls, interact on these social media sites, become a consumer of what they're consuming. And, you know, one other thing that you may find is you may actually enjoy it. I mean, I know that I'm on Instagram quite often. I know I'm on YouTube quite often. You might enjoy it because there's something for everybody there. But also, it's a way for you to consistently monitor what's happening in these online spaces. Now, so what are our concerns with current social media use? And one thing I should note is I didn't bring up any of the other social media platforms that may be up and coming and kids may be using them in different regions of the country. There are all sorts of apps. One thing that I would recommend that you do is look at the phone, look at your child's phone, or if you're a teacher, ask questions about of the students to see what apps they're actually using. Because there are a number of apps that are either specific to a game, or Roblox, for example. Roblox is a great example of social media that didn't pop up on there. Um, but I would encourage you to become familiar with all of those. But why are we concerned about the way kids interact online? Um, the first one is the interactions they have with others, those interactions that our children are exposed to, um, and then also exposure to things that we may not want them to be exposed to at a younger age. um, I think that there's a lot of content in these online spaces that children are accessing at an earlier age than we probably would want to discuss. I will say, for example, and I'm open about this. I let my daughter be on social media young, but I do also know kind of the ins and outs. Um, but while she was on social media, I did have to have the sex talk with her earlier than I wanted to, because she was exposed to things that I wouldn't consider to be age appropriate. Now, why are we concerned about social media other than cyberbullying? And cyberbullying is a major issue, yes, and that's what we're here for. But we also should be concerned about the messages that our students are receiving, because these messages alter our students and our youth's perception. And they alter our perceptions of self, our identity, and how we identify. And this is a big push in the disability community, specifically in the autism community, about our disability identity. I have one of my doc students working on a study right now that's looking at disability identity and how we cultivate that identity. And what we see on the internet, or what some of our youth are exposed to, may be things that tear that identity down. And we have to be vigilant as adults in having conversations about that. They also give interactions online alter our perceptions of our well-being, or our physical appearance, or our personality. We should be acting a certain way because somebody is acting a certain way. So one thing that's happening is our youth are getting altered perceptions of the way they should interact with one another, because everything that's happening in these online spaces is reinforced. It's designed to be addictive. It's designed to be the same as you go to Vegas and start playing the slot machines, right? Because all of these things around this circle reinforce our youth for using it. Um, Not to mention, if we have youth that struggle with social interactions in physical space, if we have youth that may not be able to navigate the physical social as well as others, they are then more drawn to the social interactions in online spaces, which then makes these types of things even more reinforcing. Um, and so let's look a little bit at the warning signs of excessive social media use. You have youth that are moving more to time online. They have an increased comparison of others. We're going to dig into cyberbullying in a second. But they have this compulsion to log on. And I don't know if any of you have ever felt this, but I know that I have. But I do have to spend a lot of time on social media. But like, I've had my phone, I've been on Facebook, and in my head, I'm thinking, man, I should check Facebook, but it's already on, right? It's this compulsion to log on because our wires have been redirected to do that. Um, and then we also see our youth engaging in risky behaviors for likes. Um, and this is a problem that we should be combating, and we'll be talking about that a little later. But we have increased sleep problems because these phones live next to the beds in most cases. And obviously, we have increased mental health concerns. That's why a lot of us are here. But there is a duality of online interactions, because I'm sure that all of us are sitting here thinking, well, some of our children and some of the youth that we work with, especially those with autism, struggle in interactions in physical space. I mean, that's they struggle socially in physical space. But online gives them a whole new way to interact that is more comfortable. In many cases, it becomes more comfortable because they don't have to be in the same physical proximity as others. And whether that's through gaming platforms or social media or special interest groups, those things are important for us to consider. And it's also important for us to consider whether or not and whether or not kids can cultivate relationships online and what the benefits of those things are. Because as the social media landscape continues to evolve, the ways in which kids can experience bullying expands, and bullying no longer begins and ends with school bells, but neither does our socialization anymore. Our socialization no longer begins and ends with school bells. But if you remember, and if you lived in an age before the internet, our socialization in fact ended as school ended, unless we went outside and played with the friends in our neighborhood that we shared physical space with. Now, the one thing that I do want to draw your attention to is these next two slides. There are increased mental health concerns, meaning the cyberbullying, or this says cyber victimization, but being a victim of cyberbullying is predictive of depression over time. So kids that experience higher rates of victimization, higher rates of cyber victimization, tend to have higher rates of depression, and the same is for anxiety. Kids that experience high rates of cyberbullying or cyber victimization tend to have higher rates of anxiety. Now, what is bullying? Um, I don't want to spend a whole heck of a lot of time with what bullying is, because I think everybody has a clear definition in their mind. But bullying, traditional bullying, is an imbalance of power. There's intent to cause harm, and it's repeated or likely to be repeated. The behaviors are repeated or likely to be repeated. Cyberbullying is one type of bullying, and cyberbullying still meets that standard definition because there's an imbalance of power. A student, we have really no power if someone wants to post something online about us, right? Somebody can post something derogatory online, and we have no power to stop it. Um, the next thing is the repetition piece. Repetition happens immediately. As soon as something's posted online, all of the followers get notified that something has been posted. And so that repetition happens. And intent happens because whatever was posted was intentionally posted. So we have to recognize that these things, that cyberbullying is just another form of bullying. There has been some debate in the field as to whether or not they were distinctly different. According to everything that we've done, that they're not. As a matter of fact, we're going to get into some of this. So now you can see up here that this slide is from the U.S. Department of Education, and I intentionally left the 2015 date here, and I know that's dated, but it's dated on purpose because this is the first time the feds came out and said bullying rates in this country have been reduced for the first time in a decade. And I'm like, hallelujah. I can do something else with my career. I'm happy to pivot. But really what that said was it went from 1 in 4 kids experience high rates of victimization to 1 in 5. That's still 1 in 5 youth. Okay. Now, you're all probably thinking, man, this guy hasn't talked a lot about autism yet. Well, here we go. When we talk about 1 in 5, this is what the general populace receives. That 1 in 5 youth, more than 5.6 million youth in this country, experience high rates of victimization. That's a lot. That's a lot. But what this doesn't tell you is it does not disaggregate by disability or disaggregate by any at-risk group for that matter. So if we took just dichotomized disability and said with and without, we're at 1 in 3 kids with disabilities experience high rates of victimization. If we disaggregate by autism, then we're at about 1 in 1.5, meaning that 2 out of every 3 students with autism tend to experience higher rates of victimization. And then when we look at cyber victimization, we have about 1 in 6 of our youth experience high rates of cyber victimization. And there are some studies out there that say that there's a 93% overlap between youth that experience traditional forms of victimization and youth that experience cyber victimization. And so that's why it's incredibly important for us to understand. And I appreciate this speaker series in talking about bullying, but recognizing that cyberbullying is a form of bullying, and that we're probably talking about a similar population of youth. Now, I don't have a lot of time for this, but I do have to acknowledge this, that there is the definition of autism from the feds, that is a disability, that is an educational diagnosis, that or an educational label that that I'm sure people are aware of. And then there's the medical identification. These two things are not synonymous with one another, even though they often overlap. And I'm sure that most of you know that in order for an individual with autism to get an IEP, the disability has to directly impact the educational performance. And that's where the difference lies, right? But in both of these, in both of the ways that we're identifying individuals with autism, it is grounded in social and communication skill deficits. Now, the next slide I'm going to show you is an aggregate of decades of research. These are risk factors that are associated with kids that experience high rates of victimization, whether it's in electronic or physical spaces. And as you look around here, you may note that most of these constructs are grounded in social and communication skill deficits. And the reason why is because bullying and cyberbullying are social constructs. They're grounded in the way we socialize. And so when we have social and communication skill deficits, that places us at greater risk for experiencing victimization, whether it's electronic or in person. The other thing that I would like to say when it comes to supporting youth with disabilities, including those with autism, is that the way we support those youth in schools matters. From their label to the status to the severity to the deficits to where they're placed, how we're providing them with services, all of those things matter. So if you're a parent of a child with autism, I'm sure that you already do this. I hope that you already do this. I'm assuming the reason you're here is because you're an advocate for your child. But as a former special education teacher and now, a researcher in special education, there's no greater benefit to your child than an adult, a parent that is informed. When you go into those IEP meetings, and if you're informed and you know the ins and outs of the IEP and what should be written in the IEP, that only creates better services for your child. And I fundamentally believe that. And I think it's an important note. Now, when it comes to cyberbullying or cyber victimization, this graph here shows the prevalence rates by subgroups. And you can see, starting from the left, that's the entire population. And this is a population of, I think, about 15,000 total youth. You can see that the total population is on the left. Then the next bar is students without disabilities. The next bar is students with disabilities grouped together. And then we move down the row for learning disabilities, other health impairments, intellectual disabilities, behavior disorders, autism, and sensory related disabilities. Now, one thing you're probably noticing is that black line. That black line represents that the student, because these are all self-report, that the student affirmed at least one item in the scale related to cyber victimization. So they experienced something in an online space that made them uncomfortable. Okay. But this is really why you're getting all of these escalated rates of cyber victimization, because we're not accounting for intent, we're not accounting for repetition, and we're not accounting for imbalance of power. We're just asking kids if it happened to them once or twice. However, if you look at the yellow bar, that yellow bar is accounting for those things. That yellow bar says that cyber victimization happened to this subgroup of youth at least one standard deviation above the total mean score, meaning that these are high rates of cyber victimization. And as you look there and compare this to students without disabilities, our students with autism are almost twice as high, almost 2 times more likely to experience cyber victimization than students without. Now, I do have some warning signs here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the warning signs. You can go to stopbullying.gov and see them. These are warning signs that a kid is experiencing, that is being cyberbullied. These are warning signs that a kid is experiencing cyberbullying. Now, the reason why I'm not going to spend a lot of time with these is because really, as parents and educators and advocates, if we're working with an individual and we see marked change in their behaviors or their device use, then that should be a red flag to us. So if we see marked change in the way youth are using their devices, that should raise a red flag to us to do something. Okay. So now, one thing, the next thing that I do want to talk briefly about is how we have a disconnect in this country in relation to what we're telling kids about socialization. Okay. Now, I wanted to be an elementary teacher. I love teaching young kids. I think it's hilarious. And they're so funny. And so I've read a majority of the children's literature in relation to bullying and what we're telling kids. And this is what we're telling all kids, right? So the one thing that I did was I just kind of try to write a book myself. So if you humor me, we're gonna take a couple minutes and read this book. The first part of this book is characters are introduced. I'm Johnny and I'm a bully. Hi, I'm Steve, and Johnny always picks on me. Then bullying is identified. I'm going to beat you up. Please no. Then one of four things happens, and I should say I realize we're talking about cyberbullying here, but trust me, this is going to map on. Then one of four things happens, right? An adult steps in, the peers step in, the victim runs away, the victim stands up for himself. And then what happens is the bullying is resolved. In most of the things that we're telling kids about bullying, and the reason why it's important for us to address this within the context of cyberbullying is because kids at a young age that are really reading children's literature typically don't understand the electronic socialization. So this is a way for them to start to understand how we're socializing, right? In physical space. Now, if this book ended here, that would be great. Bullying resolved, we can go on our way. But what we end up telling kids is this. We send them the message that you got to be best friends. And this message is really damaging, especially to our youth that struggle with understanding the dynamics of social relationships. Because what this does is it basically tells them that they were wrong. It victim blames. It tells them to suppress the feelings that are perfectly normal feelings. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. Those types of feelings, because what we're telling them to do is they're going to be best friends. And this is not reality. This is not reality for our youth. And as a matter of fact, we struggle with this concept of friendship, and I know all of us on this call probably do, especially if we have a child or we're a child with autism, or we're teaching youth with autism. We struggle with this concept of friendship. because we understand the importance of friendship, but we don't understand the nuances of friendship. And the reason why this piece is so incredibly important as we talk about cyberbullying is because we are not going to get our kids offline. We're not going to get them to stop engaging in online socialization. As a matter of fact, what kids are doing is they're becoming resilient online. They're actually developing friendships in online spaces. And if you don't, I mean, if you don't believe me, we're going to talk about that, about why, but also for those kids that we're serving and supporting. This is an important consideration because we do know friendship is one of those buffers against bullying, including cyberbullying. And so it's possible that we may not have a lot of friends in physical space, but it is possible that we do develop friends in a virtual space. Okay, because social media can be a tool for kids and us alone. And I'm going to give you a brief story. I think I got a few minutes to tell this story. So uh fresh off the heels of the pandemic, we had just started coming back to school, and my daughter was probably in third or fourth grade at the time. And so she had been online a lot, engaging in online socialization. And she ran up to me and she says, Dad, she says, you got to do something. My friend's talking about hurting themselves. And I'm like, oh no, who? And because I knew all of her friends in physical space, right? I knew all of her little friends that live in a small community. And she's like, Cool Ninja 2447. And I had to take a step back and say, okay, do I respond like most parents would respond and say, that's not your friend, that's just some random person online? uh or do I recognize the way that she's talking and recognize the emergency in her voice and do something? And so I did something. I followed through and followed up. We got that little uh kid some help. But then a couple of days later, my wife texts me this plant, uh, and this will make sense in a second. But my wife texts me this plant, and she's a plant connoisseur, has plants everywhere in my house. Um, and like she sends me this picture, and I respond indifferently. I'm like, cool. And she's like, all my friends in my plant group love this. And I started thinking about this. I'm like, my young daughter is developing friends. My wife is developing friends in online spaces. Is it possible for us? And are we thinking about cyberbullying in the wrong or misguided lens? And so we started exploring it, right? And so here's what we found, right? The first thing that we found, and one of the most important pieces in relation to cyberbullying, like even for all of our youth, regardless of disability status, this is the most important piece, is that most of our youth are pretty resilient when it comes to things that people say from people they don't actually know. And I mean don't know in a physical space. So like when our kids are relatively resilient to somebody posting something anonymously, our kids are relatively resilient to somebody posting something in a public forum like a Reddit thread. Um, our kids are incredibly resilient when it comes to gaming sites. I don't know if any of you have ever sat and played a game with middle schoolers, but some of the things that they say to each other, oh, it's creative, right? So like they're relatively resilient to that. Here's the thing, and this is why it's important for us as parents and as educators to come together and really support our youth through online social development, is because what's most damaging to kids is when somebody they know posts something that gets disseminated to other people they know. It's this known factor. This known factor is what's so damaging. And it goes back to that slide we had before, where we had this 93% overlap between traditional forms of bullying and cyberbullying. It's because that's the piece that is damaging. Most of the time, kids are relatively resilient to these other spaces. Now, so in response to that, what have we been doing? Uh, Well, um, some of the problems that we have in schools, and I'm sure if you are a parent of a child with autism, you'll resonate with this. Um, we really want our kids to have friends, uh, regardless of age, regardless of identity related factors, regardless of any other context. We want our kids to have friends. I mean, we ourselves want friends, but we want those friendships to be bi-directional. But what we're doing in the schools is we're really forcing this unidirectional piece where we overuse the word friends, because what our kids need to know is that we all don't have to be friends. We just have to be friendly, right? We don't have the capacity to be friends with lots and lots of people. As a matter of fact, our mental health outcomes are just as beneficial if we have 100 friends versus two. And what we don't know, and what's incredibly interesting and something that we're exploring as we talk, is whether or not those friendships can be developed online, and whether or not there's the same positive mental health outcomes for that. But what we're doing in our schools and is forcing these unidirectional friendships. And it also happens in online spaces, especially for some of our kids with disabilities, depending on how they're viewing like these influencers. Sometimes our kids with disabilities, including autism, can befriend an influencer. That influencer may interact with them once or twice, and now all of a sudden they interpret that as a friendship. And that's one of the challenges we have in these unidirectional friendships and online spaces, is the interpretation of the socialization that we have to help with. And one thing that we have to help with is really recognizing that friendship is complicated. And I show this image because I just want to illustrate how complicated it is. But as we break it down, when we teach our kids about friendship, that friendship is grounded in it's mutual. There's shared interest, but ultimately we make each other better. I mean, the people in that friend group make each other better, and it doesn't matter if that's online or in physical spaces. And that piece is fundamentally important to teach our kids, that those people that we interact with, they bring something to the table the same way we bring something to the table, and we make each other better. So it's conceivable that our youth are making friends online. And I'm going to show you briefly some evidence to that. We measured online friendships just as we measured cyberbullying, because we do know that our youth are experiencing cyber victimization. We know that, right? But why do the question that we have to keep asking ourselves is, why do our kids keep getting online in these social spaces if they keep experiencing cyber victimization? I mean, why would we continue to go somewhere and do something that we know somebody's going to say something that's damaging to us? That should have been the question long ago, right? But that's the question that we're starting to answer now. And so the our justification and our reasoning for that is this: that this is our high school students. Now, these are kids with and without disabilities. This is fresh off the press. We didn't have time to disaggregate these data, but you can see out of the 333 high school students we had, 77, about 77.5% of them are saying they have online friends that they've never met in physical spaces, and about 69 to 70% of them are saying that those friends are just as meaningful to them as their friends in physical space. A very similar story for our middle school participants, and this is 865 students. And so, to me, this is an important consideration that I don't think a lot of people thought about when talking about cyberbullying. Because what we used to do and what we used to tell kids in cyberbullying was, we used to tell them to log off, delete the app, don't don't participate, all these things that we used to tell kids, failing to realize that they had to. they had to interact in online spaces because that is part of their social world, especially for kids that are struggling socializing physical space. It becomes much more comfortable for them to socialize in these online spaces. And so what keeps kids coming back and what keeps kids engaging in online, even if they do experience cyber victimization, is this piece right here. The kids are done friends, and those friends are meaningful to them. And that's what builds resiliency, right? Because if you look at this, this is what, 50, 60, some odd percent. But if we look at that mapped onto this, we're at like less than 20% of our students experience high rates of victimization. And that piece is incredibly important for us to consider when we're moving towards our interventions, because we know kids are going to continue to be online. We know that it's part of kids' socialization, social constructs. And we also know that cyberbullying is going to happen. So we have to build resiliency there while giving our youth the tools necessary to interact socially in an appropriate way in electronic spaces. So what are we going to do? Got, some time here, so we're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do. The first thing we have to do is address the hidden curriculum. And these are the social rules and norms that everybody seems to know but aren't directly taught. And one thing that I do in schools, and one important piece that I continue to work in schools, is from general education all the way to in individualized intensive supports. I talk to the teachers about embedding social communication and behavioral skills within the daily curriculum. If we're going to teach math, then why not focus on some sort of aspect of socialization? To me, that's incredibly important, and it translates from physical to electronic spaces, because kids are learning how to engage with one another in a natural environment. But I think all of you are probably here wanting to talk a little bit about this. Um, and this is digital citizenship. These are the programs and things that we need to be doing in our schools and in our homes. These are the things that I talk to my own kid about. All of these components are important. Now, why has digital citizenship programming not been successful for our youth, um, including our youth with autism? Is because we teach mainly safety, and that's the lowest bar, right? The lowest bar is teaching safety. But if you think about this, if you think about when we teach safety, the way we teach safety is don't disclose, don't tell, don't give people your name, don't tell people where you live, don't do these things. That's the way we're teaching safety. But if you remember what I just said, that our kids are developing friends in online spaces, my friends know my name. My friends know where I live. My friend, I mean, they don't know my physical address, right? But they know that I live in Columbia, Missouri. And so this safety piece gets a little convoluted. And so we have to add these other two pieces to our digital citizenship programming, whether it's in schools or in our homes. The next one is choice, and the last one is permanence. So getting into safety, sure, we shouldn't be sharing personal information online, right? Sometimes we can have our kids share their first name, not their last name. I talk to my daughter about not sharing our names because I'm Googleable, and part of the problem there is that you can find if I'm out of town pretty easily. So I try not to have her share that type of information. Um, we uh, we also, in dealing with safety, we want to regulate screen time for general well-being, meaning that we want our youth to be able to live in both worlds, physical and virtual, seamlessly. And so we don't want them to become so consumed by the virtual world that the physical world becomes unimportant. And so we have to regulate and monitor the screen time for their general well-being. Our youth need to know when to ask for help and what to do when they feel unsafe. These are things that we should be talking about in our homes and in our schools. Our students should know exactly what to do, when to ask for help, and what to do when they feel unsafe. For our students that struggle with socialization, and we need to talk to them about things that could potentially be unsafe, even if they're not feeling unsafe, if that makes sense for you. We need to talk to them about some of the things that people can say that are unsafe, that maybe at the time they don't feel unsafe, but could be. And then they also need general knowledge about websites that are appropriate to browse and websites that aren't. Our students are gonna stumble upon websites here and there that are largely inappropriate, but they need to know how to navigate that world. Now, when it comes to choice, this this piece is really important to discuss because um, we're really talking about, especially our kids with autism, is what they post, how they say it. Because now we've taken all of the nonverbals out of the equation, right? And now it's literally words. And so we have to work with our youth on how to emote through words alone, and that's recognizing the importance of language, but also recognizing meaning and context. Um, and these are things that I think we all can work on, because some of these rules and norms are not exactly a first language for those of us who didn't grow up with technology. And so we have to learn and teach our youth these rules and norms. But also, it's a choice on who you let in. So who our students let into their electronic circle is a choice. What is downloaded is a choice. What is posted and what the decision-making process for somebody to post something online is a choice. And this is something you should talk to your child about. This is something I have conversations with my undergraduate students about, is what's the decision-making process when you post something online, and what's the intent. But also, it's a choice in what we respond to and what we don't respond to. If somebody sends me a message and I don't respond, that is a choice, and it's sending a message. And then the next thing that we should be talking to our children about is this concept of permanence. What is posted is developing a digital footprint, and there are, in fact, future considerations that we have to go through when it comes to establishing this online presence. I know that there are things that get posted online that um, that several years down the road people wish weren't posted. I'm sure all of you know somebody that's done something like this. Uh, the other thing that our kids need to know is that programs and apps like Snapchat that say things get deleted after a period of time, we have to recognize that there's a back end data server, right? This is part of my job as a researcher, is recognizing how we keep data safe, and there's always a back end data server. And so if you read the fine print, those things don't actually go away. They still live somewhere. And so all of these pieces have to be future considerations, or understanding of permanence. So how are we going to talk to our youth? How do we talk to our youth about these really important concepts in avoiding cyber victimization, but also having an environment to where they're free to develop social relationships? Because I believe that that's probably the line that you all are straddling. How to avoid them experiencing cyber victimization, but also allowing them the freedom to develop social relationships that are meaningful. So the first thing I would do is talk about recommendations for usage. Set time limits and on use, and those time limits can increase as age increases. I mean, that's generally the marker. Um, you can use apps to track those online times. Um, a really important piece for you as parents, especially, but even our teachers, is understanding the reporting mechanisms on each one of these platforms. I would start with the top four, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, and looking at their reporting mechanisms. All you have to do is go into the search bar. The easiest way is to just go into the search and search for parental controls. If nothing comes up, which I'm sure it will, then you can go into your settings, and there's a place in settings where you can look. But all of these companies have parental controls. Uh, we can have our students turning phones off at a certain time, or making sure that their phones are away from them at a certain time so they can engage in socialization in physical spaces. Uh, Take advantage of the mental health screenings that are offered at schools or at doctors' offices to monitor mental health over time, to make sure that that some of the online interactions aren't impacting the overall well-being. Avoid bringing the phone to bed. This is something I don't do. I mean, I do bring my phone to bed, so like I don't practice what I preach here. But I know it's hard, but avoid bringing it to bed. Turn off notifications. And then if something is really becoming problematic, we can remove the app from the phone. But if you remove an app from the phone, be aware of how youth can mask apps on their phone. There are those things. Okay, so with that said, here's a couple of things. I got a couple of minutes before we take questions. Tips for adults to support our youth online. Keep the device screen visible if we are concerned. Have conversations with our kids about their online use. Monitor activity online. Use these parental controls. Be a consumer of the apps yourself. Establish clear rules and guidelines, and encourage activities away from electronics. This is, if you just take this list and start doing these things, then at least you can feel safer about the way your child or student is interacting in online spaces. But one of the things that I think is most important, and one of the things that has really sparked a relationship with me and my own daughter, is I got away from asking my child, how's your day? So I used to pick her up every day from school when she was in elementary school. And she would get in, and I would say, how was your day? She'd say, fine. And that was like in second grade, she started, giving me the fine. And so then I started asking direct questions. And I think that this works with all youth, including those youth that struggle with socialization, is to ask more direct questions about something, so they can't give some ambiguous answer or some one word answer. Like, what made you laugh today? Tell me one thing that you found exciting today. What did you play at recess today? Who decided what you played at recess today? Tell me one thing you read today, or what made today a good day. That's the broadest question that I tend to ask. Is my daughter will say good. I'll say, what made it good? But if you're asking these questions and keeping an open line of communication with your child or student, then you can also ask some of these questions. And these questions are things that get at cyberbullying and online relationships. And some of these are a little bit more challenging to answer if you don't have a good relationship with the child. So you can say, how do you spend your time online? How much time do you spend online? Do you have any close friends online? But then you see these last couple of questions, and these last couple of questions are those conversation starters, especially if you're concerned about cyberbullying. Has anyone ever asked you to share personal information? Uh, have you ever felt uncomfortable talking to somebody online? And who do you trust at school to talk about cyberbullying? So if you're a parent or an educator, if you have a good relationship with youth and they have an open line of communication, um, then these are some of the questions that we can ask. With that, as our understanding of friendship and cyberbullying has evolved, duality exists between online social interactions. So therefore, we must teach our youth how to engage in socially appropriate behaviors in electronic spaces, because cyberbullying is going to exist. But what keeps kids coming back is the fact that they find comfort in those online socializations. With that, I will take questions, and this is all the information that you would need from me if you have questions and want to contact me directly. This is my emails, my socials. We got a website. You can call that phone number. So I can take questions.
Okay. Okay. So while we wait for some more questions to come through on the chat, we had some questions that were submitted ahead of time. Let me go to those. So one person asked, can you share some apps or tools that we could use to monitor our kids' cell phones and laptops? So I think they're looking for some specifics.
Yeah, some specific monitoring apps. There are some out there, but one thing that I would encourage everybody to do, especially if you're using Apple devices, is, I can monitor just about anything my daughter does on my phone, just from the tools and resources they give you on Apple devices. And I would assume that if you're on the same network, that's a possibility with Android devices as well. I would say the biggest key to that is making sure that your child is on the same network as you. The other thing that you can do is, it really just depends on what you're trying to monitor, in terms of what app you would want. If you're trying to monitor a specific app, then I just make it a rule in my house that I know the passwords and all of that, and I have those on. Like, I can pull up my daughter's Instagram right now on my phone that's connected directly to my Instagram. There's the one thing that you have to be aware of, regardless of any of these monitoring apps, is whether or not your child creates different social media profiles. Because I think the biggest limitation to the question that's being asked is that we monitor the things that we know, yet children are becoming savvy enough to like create different profiles, or they can download an app and at night re-upload that app, log in and interact and read and delete that app again before the morning. And so those are little tricks that are happening. And that's why I think it's important for you to be on the same network as your child, because I can see in at least on this Apple device, what apps have been downloaded and what apps have been deleted.
Hmm. But can you be a little more specific? How is it that you can see what apps have been downloaded?
So like, if I just go to the app store, and as long as my daughter's on the same network, then it's going to show me a time that, like, it'll show me all the apps that I have it'll show me all the apps that I have on my phone. It'll show me all the apps that I have in my library. And it'll show me if those apps are still functional on phones or not.
And it shows you which phone they're on?
I can see that, yes.
Okay. That's great. I had no idea we could do that.
Oh, now I'm downloading an app.
No.
Shit. Oh, the other thing that I would encourage you to do is make sure that you set, if your child is on your network, which I strongly encourage, I would make sure that you set any app download that you have to approve, because either your child has to get your password, or like on my daughter's phone, I have to physically hold it to allow her to download something. Like
and you were able to,
it requires my Face ID or my thumbprint.
and that was in the parental controls, or how did you make that setting?
Yeah, so when you set up the phone, in settings on the iPhone, there's going to be, I believe it's in general. let's see. I have to find it. I'd have to find it for you, but there's oh, privacy and security. If you go to privacy and security, you can get all the information like your location services, safety check. You can get uh, any of the things that you need. Oh, and passwords. So you would want to go through here and find. It does take some time because I don't know exactly the navigation tools because I set them up as soon as we get the phone. But you can go in to where, especially on the new iPhones, it can take two owners, like so it can have two thumbprints or two face IDs. And you can set it to where if they're downloading an app and it going through your network, that you are the one that has to approve it, or they have to know your password.
Okay. Well, that's good. I
So,
mean, now that people know that that's something you can do, everyone can
mm,
Google how exactly to do it. And
there's
that's,
a lot of wild things you can do on this phone that lots of people don't know.
yeah. Okay. Another question. Do you have any worries with AI chat groups?
I don't I have lots of worries about AI. I don't really know where to go with that question because it's so new. Like, I mean, it's just we don't know. I don't know. I mean, AI can do amazing things, and we're doing some really cool stuff with artificial intelligence, and also like augmented reality types of things that are going to be really beneficial for teachers and kids, especially like in the area of socialization. We're developing these apps that would allow kids to socialize in a virtual world that is more that aligns more closely with what they would be expected to do in physical worlds. So like it's hard for me to bash AI or be concerned about AI at this point in time because there are a lot of cool things we can do, but we're really just not. We don't know enough about whether or not there's AI in chat rooms and how people are responding and if these responses are auto generated. We just don't know enough. So, as a scientist, I can't say one way or the other.
Okay. Sounds like there's plenty of potential for things to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it's the same thing. I think about this all the time when I talk to my friends who aren't in the field and they're asking me about their kids and they're like, my son or daughter was talking to somebody on Instagram the other day, and he's like, for all I know, it's a 60-year-old man sitting behind his computer, and I'm like, but also for all you know, it's a kid that's the same age as your child that has a parent that's saying the same thing about your kid, and so that's more likely what's happening than not. And so I think that we have many more things to worry about right now, but we'll see.
Okay. Another question. What is the best way for parents to screen websites for safety?
I mean, I don't really know the best way to screen sites per se. I think it's having a conversation with what's appropriate and what's not. Um, One thing that I would regulate though is making sure that if you're concerned about that, and you're monitoring your child's internet use, making sure that you keep they are not allowed to put their browser on like incognito mode, and making sure that they're not allowed to delete the search history. Those things are important because what you'll see is if you monitor these what they're doing nightly or weekly or however you want to do it, you could start to see a pattern of where they're going, which would then give you more of a key as to what to watch out for. um you know it's really hard for me to say because uh it's subjective to what parents want to allow their children to be exposed to and what others find okay. So the best way I've found to monitor is my daughter's not allowed to turn incognito mode on her phone or on her computer. Like that, it has to be, and what I mean by that is private browsing. It doesn't directly track your history. You have to go through a whole back end thing to find it. And so I want any website that she goes to be tracked in her history log, and I want to be able to have access to that history log. I also am aware of when she's online and when she's not. So if there's a huge gap in that log, and I'd have questions because all of the websites that they visit are time stamped. So you would want to just track that. To me, that's the easiest way.
Yeah. It all sounds very time consuming for parents.
I mean, it is, but like also, um, it can be, but the thing is, if you're worried about it, then you know, then you put in time. If you put in the time for a few days and you realize that it's that you're that everything's probably okay, then you can go to intermittent monitoring. And I don't look at my daughter's phone every day or her computer every day. I've she knows the expectations. She knows that she has developed a level of trust with us that happened over time, and then if I do find something, then we have a conversation about and I trust me, I found many things, right? And most of them hinge on 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 sexualization of different things, and that's kind of the conversations that we've had a lot. But for others it may be conversations about other pieces of identity. It just happens to be in our house there's been a lot of sexualization, and so we have conversations about that, but I don't monitor it every day.
Mhm.
Some people might.
Yeah. Okay. So another question has come in. Do you have any resources for online safety education for my ASD son who lives independently? Your presentation has helped me understand his interest in chat rooms, but I still worry about him being victimized.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of good places that I would start. The first place I would start is stopbullying.gov. I think they have a lot of great resources available for cyber victimization, cyberbullying. The Pacer Center is fantastic, and they have several resources. And then I have to find the name of this center for you real quick, but I can tell you in a second.
Yeah. And by the way, these are, if you go to our bullying resource on the XMinds website, both of those, both Pacer and stopbullying.gov are both there for people who, and maybe Annie can put those in the chat.
And then there's, well, this is should have been easy enough for me to figure out. There's also the Cyberbullying Research Center that's housed out of Florida Atlantic University with Justin Patchen and Samir Haduja. They do really great work and they have things available. But when it comes to, I will tell you, to be perfectly honest, when it comes to online socialization and a positive spin on what we've just been talking about and what we've been trying to do in my camp, there's very little on it, because it was like people just haven't been thinking about it, right? People haven't been there. There wasn't a there hasn't been a push to understand whether or not kids are able to develop relationships in online spaces that are safe. Um, and so we're just starting that. And so what you all heard today in that little snippet of when we were talking about it is really some of the first conversations that people have had on whether or not it's beneficial. And as a matter of fact, we are uniquely interested, at least my team is uniquely interested in youth with autism, specifically because of some of the challenges in terms of socialization in physical spaces, and whether or not the development of friends in online spaces serve the same mental health benefits as having friends in physical space. We don't know.
Right. That's an
And
interesting.
I'm not afraid to. I mean, I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist, so I can't, like, I haven't studied it directly. I believe that it is, like, because we do know through the pandemic when people were socializing online, that allowed them to have that outlet of socialization. I believe that it would be beneficial, especially for kids with autism, but I don't have any empirical data as of right now to say yes or no. I only have empirical data to say it's happening.
Right. Is that your research, your future research is going to be revealing more about that?
Yes, I hope so. I mean, there's a lot of people that are interested in it because, you know, for so long with cyberbullying, people were just saying turn your phone off and delete the apps and all this stuff without recognizing that our kids have to be involved in those things because it's, I mean, if they're not, then they're not socializing the same way everybody else is, right? They're limiting their social capacity. And so for so long, that was our response. And now we've realized that can't be our response. And I'll tell you really why that is because us as adults, we started to figure out that we can have friends in online spaces. Like, I got people that I talk to about Star Wars all the time online, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's what prompted it.
Right. And our kids who are on the spectrum tend to have real special interests, and finding other people with that same special interests can be very, engaging for them in a really
Yeah,
positive way.
absolutely. And somebody that can talk to you as intelligently and as comprehensively as a topic
Yeah.
is something that is unmatched, and a lot of our kids with autism can't get that with the people that they share a physical space with.
Right. Okay, here's another question. For a parent who's concerned about invading or interfering with their child's privacy, she says, how can you prevent bullying and monitor your child's online activity without interfering excessively in the child's privacy? So what do you think about the whole issue of privacy here?
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a delicate balance. I think it starts. This isn't going to be helpful for people that are struggling with this, but my first statement. I think it starts as they develop, right? I mean, it starts with some of the conversational topics that we just had. Like, when I talk to my daughter, I don't just allow her to say one word statements. I'll stand there and ask questions until she elaborates. And as that has progressed, she knows if she wants me to go away and I ask a question, she's going to give me a complete answer. But part of it is just like this iterative process of establishing standards, boundaries, and values with your children, and being consistent with that. And then part of it is, as soon as they start to have access to either internets or devices or whatever they're getting access to, then you set up those same standards, values, and practices with that and say, I'm going to monitor these things, and I'm going to monitor them in this way, and explain the way that you're going to monitor them. And should the monitoring process be violated, and give them a list of things that would violate that, then that monitoring process would become more stringent. And just being open and honest with how it's going to happen. Most of our kids aren't engaging in I know a lot of us think they're doing just really weird things online. Most of our kids aren't. They're just talking to each other like they would in school. Um, and I think that as long as you have an open form of communication, uh, it's not really invading their privacy because they're aware of it. Um, and I know most of you would hate this. I know most of you would think that this is just the most wild thing on earth, but my kid has access to my phone too. Like, she
Yeah.
can look, she knows my passcodes, she knows all that stuff, and she can get on my Instagram or any of that because I practice what I preach, and I think that that's important to model for our students as well. So if she wanted to go through and look at all my conversations that I had with her friend's dad, because I'm really good friends with her friend's dad, she can, because I mean that's just part of it is in privacy is a two-way street, right? Privacy is having conversations and recognizing what we're past our time, but that's my recommendation is to just have conversations and start setting boundaries at the beginning, um and then be consistent.
Okay. We did have one last question. I know our time is up. If you could very quickly answer this one question. How should parents monitor if their teen or young adult child wants to take an online friend into an in real life friend? So what if they want to meet? What safety measures should we consider? If you
Yeah,
can.
I mean, it depends on age first. I mean, that's kind of, or it depends on kind of the age level, maturity, I guess. The next thing that I would do if this happened with us is I would also talk the same way I would do if my daughter wanted to meet somebody in physical space that she went to school with. I'd have communication with the parents. And I would say this is kind of the expectation. I would have direct supervision, whether it's direct one-to-one or it's at a distance, but be able to monitor the whole time. And I would just approach it the same way I would approach if I never met somebody, then it's no different than them being online versus at the school. It's I would talk to the parents, I would closely monitor the interaction. I would do that a few times, and just make sure that I've cultivated a safe space.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right, I want to be mindful of everyone was here till 8:30. We're a little past that time, so I'll turn things over to Melanie now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. This has been really illuminating, and I know I have learned a lot. So it will definitely change the way I parent my teen. I'd like to invite everyone in our audience to complete a short 2-question feedback form. The third and fourth questions are optional, so 2 questions, multiple choice. It doesn't take long, and we really do value your input. Annie, I think, is putting that in the chat. We've recorded this presentation and we'll email you a link to the recording as well as a link to the slides. Our Bullying and Autism Speaker Series wraps up along with our programming year on June 19th with the annual Autistic Self-Advocates panel. Bullying, what we can tell you. 3 autistic individuals will discuss their experiences of being bullied in school, the workforce, and their community. Find out about all these events on our calendar at xminds.org. Just a special thank you to our partners at the Autism Society of Maryland. And again, thank you, Dr. Rose, and all of you for joining us here tonight. Have a good night.